If you're a member of Renegade University, you know that over the last year, we've been looking for a teacher to teach Introduction to Cryptocurrency, a course that many of you have been demanding. Well, we found our guy. He's Vin Armani, who's well known in the crypto world as an educator and an entrepreneur, and he was on a recent episode of Unregistered, which has gotten a huge response. Vin will be teaching a 4-part webinar called From Satoshi to Financial Sovereignty, an Introduction to Cryptocurrency. It begins April 19th and runs for 4 consecutive Mondays. If you want to take this course, and it is filling up fast, go to renegadeuniversity.com and you'll see it on the front page, or you can click video courses on the left side and it'll come right up for you. Again, this is Vin Armani, the great Vin Armani's course, From Satoshi to Financial Sovereignty, 4-part webinar, an introduction to cryptocurrency beginning April 19th. Go to renegadeuniversity.com and sign up fast. Thank you. Thank you to Headspace for sponsoring the Unregistered podcast. This last year has been the most challenging year for many of us in terms of mental health. But there is something very powerful, very effective that you can do about that. And I can attest to that because I've been doing it for more than 6 years. Go to headspace.com/renegade to get the same free 1-month trial that I first used more than 6 years ago, and that changed my life. Again, go to headspace.com/renegade to get a 1-month free trial to the great meditation app, Headspace. Do you want to work in cryptocurrency? Do you want to work from home? Do you want to make $50,000 a year doing it? Do you want full medical and dental benefits? Would you like to have 30 full paid days off per year? If you do, email workcrypto21@gmail.com. He has some jobs for you. Again, if you're interested in working in cryptocurrency in a fast-growing company, email workcrypto21@gmail.com. This is the Unregistered podcast, and I'm Thaddeus Russell. This is a show about ideas, people, and behaviors that are considered inappropriate, out of bounds, or beyond the pale. The things you're not supposed to talk about if you're a school teacher, a college professor, a businessman, a politician, a parent, a neighbor, or even a podcast host. These are the things you're not supposed to say or even think if you're a good liberal, a good conservative, or a good citizen. Each week, I'll interview a person who has something bad to say. They might be a journalist or a professor. They might be a porn star or a drug dealer. They might just be an ordinary person with an ordinary job who doesn't care about the rules of polite society. I'm not interested in breaking the rules just to be a troublemaker. I'm interested in people who break the rules of conventional thought and to expand the scope of what is possible to say in our society. I'm interested in people who make me think. My guest this week calls herself a conservative. But I think that after you listen to this interview, you'll agree with me that her worldview is wholly original. And I hope you agree with me that it could serve as the basis for alliances between the left and the right and the non-aligned that could make a much better world. This is my interview with Sonnie Johnson. I am joined today from, I don't know, where are you, Sonnie Johnson? Where in the world are you?
In Virginia.
You're in Virginia, Northern Virginia?
Yeah.
Like outside of DC?
Yeah, close enough, far enough away from DC to keep my guns. So I can get in, get out, still be protected. So
you're perfectly situated. So I'm so glad to have you on the show. The reason you're on the show is that my friend Hotep Jesus said you've got to get Sonnie Johnson on your show. You've got to get Sonnie Johnson on your show. So I started to look at you. I started watching videos, and I said, yes, I got to get Sonnie Johnson on my show. I've been watching a lot of you, listening to a lot of you, and yeah, I've never heard anyone like you before. And it's funny because I'm sure most people, the top thing they'll think of when they first hear about you is, oh, she's a Republican. No, she's not. Then it's oh, she's a conservative, and then it's like, and you do say that, but then it's like, oh, but then what you have to say about things like the cops and Black Lives Matter, and wait, she's not playing the conservative game perfectly either. I've never heard anyone like you. I'm gonna say this. I think of all the people who are not on the left, you're the one person who could really talk to the left and really persuade them to maybe change some of their ideas, but we'll get into that. Last June, was it at the White House where you met with Trump? Was that in the White House?
Yes.
There's a video of you with some quote Black leaders, one of my favorite phrases. And we can talk about the other Black leaders in the room, but you were there, and they were all men, weren't they? Except for you.
Yes.
Yeah. And this was last June, and I guess it was Trump talking about the Black unemployment rate being so low and how his administration's been so good for Black people, et cetera. I think that was the point of it, right? To have a bunch of Black leaders say that back to him. And then there you are.
Actually, let me correct that, because I don't think that that's what was wanted. All right.
Okay.
We were told going in specifically, say what's on your heart, say what you feel, say what's on your mind, be yourself. So that's what we were asked to do going in.
Okay.
We were not asked to do the talking points or the regurgitation or anything like that, because if we had been, I would have said no and just not have went. So we weren't asked any of that. But here's the rub. A lot of people think that they're big and bad and bold until they get into that moment. So a lot of people came into that moment with a lot that they wanted to say, but when that moment hit them, they shrunk from it. Okay. So when you're sitting in front of the leader of the free world and the press has their cameras clicking on you, and I guess sometimes that moment can be a little bit big. And I just want to reiterate that we were not asked to give the talking points and all of that stuff. So just put that up front.
You're making some excuses for the people in that room, but okay.
I'm trying to be nice. Everyone says I'm so mean and I'm so evil, like I'm Dragon Lady. Like I'm legitimately trying to be nice here, okay? I'm trying here.
No, you're not mean. You're fierce. That's the word. You're not mean. I've never heard you be mean. You're fierce. You're fierce as hell.
Right? I am never mean to anyone unless, of course, I'm returning energy. Like if you come at me that way, then I will return the energy to you. But no, I'm not. I try to be fair, because that's the only way you can maintain your integrity level, especially in this realm. The only way you can really maintain your integrity level is if you're fair and you don't hold things personal and judge things through a grudge or even your own bias, own bias lens. You know what I'm saying? You have to be able to pull yourself back from that and look at the situation fairly, and then you can adjust accordingly. And I think that a lot of people miss that step on their way to joining in the hysterics of modern day social media, especially.
Now, I mean, come on, you are angry, but listen, I'm going to sound like a white liberal right now. Okay. Which I usually don't do. You're angry. You're angry.
Yes.
Yeah. You're angry.
And I'm sitting here like, why the hell aren't more of y'all angry? Y'all keep coming on here every week talking about what's happening in Chicago. You coming in here every damn week talking about what's happening. Why aren't you angry? You're sitting up here telling me I'm not Black, I'm American. Well, you see what is happening to your fellow American citizens. Why the hell aren't you angry? Why aren't you yelling? Why aren't you mad? Why aren't you saying no? This has to change. Like, why not? So I'm not running from that stereotype. You damn right I'm mad. And I'm gonna make sure you know that I'm mad. And I spent a lot of time being nice. I spent a lot of time trying to figure out how to negotiate. And then I realized that that was a waste of time because nobody cares. But then when you put your boot on their neck, intellectually speaking, when you put your boot on their neck, then all of a sudden you get their attention. So I don't care if you think I'm loud. I don't care if you think I'm brass. I'm going to use every single one of those things to make sure my boot comes down harder on your neck.
Which stereotype are you talking about, Sonnie?
The loud Black woman in this case.
That's right.
I would like, you gonna make me back. I'm gonna like make merch like loud Black woman and proud of it or something. You know what I'm saying? Like, it's not the insult people intended to be.
Well, I was going to say, so it's the, the angry Black woman, right, as the stereotype, which, I'm sure you've been called a lot, but then I'm thinking, wait a second. So you're in the same business I'm in, which is the same business a lot of people are in, which is we talk about politics for a living. Now, tell me which of us who do that are not angry. Tell me.
And which ones don't yell.
Thank you.
And which ones don't aggressively make their point? Which ones don't interrupt when they're being fed bullshit? Which one of us does not do that?
Thank you. Yes.
And it's fine with me because it lets people think that they can come at me without preparation, which is fine with me because the best thing about a stereotype is that it hides who the person really is. So you have shielded yourself from who I really am thinking about this stereotype. You're thinking I'm going to be yelling at you in stupidity. And when I actually come out and I'm actually giving you ideas, I'm actually giving you ideology, I'm actually giving you a purpose, a reason, a why. And just because my voice is elevated when I do, don't think that the message is being missed by those in the crowd just because I happen to be an octave higher.
Yep. So back to what you did to Trump. So what did you say to Donald Trump when he was talking about how great things were for Black people?
That it isn't, that his people are lying to him, and they lied to him for 4 years. And he wanted people that would say nice things instead of telling him the truth. And this is the consequences of that. And it really bugs me because if you look at like Donald Trump as the businessman, right? So you ask Donald Trump, would you buy a building, not inspect it, not take all the necessary steps to understand what was going on inside that building before you put Trump's name on the side of it? You wouldn't do that. You would make sure every single aspect of that building was up to the standard that you have set for Trump before you would put your name on the top of it. And when it comes to Black outreach, that methodology was not followed. They did not go in and check the tires. They didn't go in and inspect the building. They just plastered Trump's name across the side of it, and that became a representation for everything that his policies were supposed to stand for. So in like the most detrimental way, they outsourced all of the work that needed to be done before the name should have went across the top, and you're seeing the results of that.
Yeah, and meanwhile, the numbers of people in prison, the numbers of people getting killed by the police have not changed.
No, they haven't. But those are going to be, and this is what I try to get Republicans to see. Like, why won't you just tell people the truth? Like, you can't fix it from the federal level. It can't be solved. Like, why has that become so taboo in Republican and conservative circles, just to be like, that is not the job of the federal government to do it. And no matter how much you try to squeeze justice out of the federal system, you're never going to get it to the extent and to the level that we need it necessary to actually make fundamental ideological changes in Black communities. It didn't start at the federal level, and it's not going to be solved by the federal level. Most every Jim Crow bill or law was started locally. Every single freaking one. And then it spread from local to regional, from regional to state, from state to territory, space, and then space to the federal government. Every single aspect, every single time we move as a country, that is how we move. The start is at the local government, and then it works its way up. So you cannot tell me any solution that starts at the federal government is one that will actually work for the American people.
Beautiful. Now, let me just say that is what conservatism sounds like, ladies and gentlemen. That's what conservatism is. It's about politics at the local level. Ask any serious classical conservative, and they will say, Sonnie Johnson is speaking my language. This is the politics that conservatism since Edmund goddamn Burke centuries ago, right, has been about. It's about politics at the local level. The federalization of politics, the nationalization of politics is what has been a progressive idea that, and I'm just sounding like you now, I'm just borrowing from you, that the Republican Party of this country bought into or played along with, right?
No, they're safe. You know, so their red seats are safe. Their local governments are safe. You know what I'm saying? So they don't have, that's become the ideology of the right, is the vote with your feet. And I understand that in the sense of the freedom that is given to Americans to be able to change your circumstance or situation by moving. But what it became was a political tactic so that you didn't have to solve problems that were in other people's communities.
Oh, okay.
You know what I'm saying?
Yeah,
so it became a political tactic instead of a way to look at liberty and freedom and understand that kind of movement. So instead of solving problems, you walk away from them. You Brexit them instead of actually solving them. And that is what has kept Republicans and conservatives out of Black communities 60, 70, 80, 100 years in some cases. In the case of my birthplace of Richmond, Virginia, there's only been one Republican mayor the entire existence of the city since they've been keeping track. So if you're going to have a refusal to actually solve legitimate problems because the people that those problems are occurring to don't look like you, then it's going to matriculate, it's going to grow, it's going to metastasize, and it's going to be coming to a neighborhood near you. Welcome to 2021.
That's right. Now, again, what you said to Donald Trump was you educated him, because it didn't seem like he ever knew about this, about what was really going on in Ferguson, right? Which is that there was an elaborate, years-long, possibly decades-long shakedown scheme, essentially, right, where the local government was funding itself by having its police give out tickets wherever it could, whenever it could, to anybody it could. And that in Ferguson, Missouri, was mostly working class Black people, right? And so when Michael Brown, now, okay, yes, I know the evidence has come out that I guess he actually did aggress, he did initiate whatever the violence, but to me, if you're born into that system, if you're born into a neighborhood in which the cops are constantly shaking everyone down to nickel and dime them to pay for the shitty schools that they have to go to, and in the even worse prisons that they'll probably end up in, yeah, I'd be a little hostile to cops too.
Well, this is my problem with conservatives, right? So we are supposed to be the people that believe in the idea of the individual. So now you have this case of the state versus the individual. Right? There is no looking at the individual. It's only the case from the state. So everything that the state offers becomes gospel. How is that a tenet of conservatism? That's the part of it that I don't understand and I don't quite get. And of course, it's backed up with law and order. Okay, well, what if there are unjust laws? What if there are laws that you don't agree with, that you don't think should be on the books, that you don't think should be enforced? What in that case? Do we just continue to say law and order, even if we don't like the laws? And of course, a conservative would say, no, we changed the laws. What the hell do you think that they were talking about in Ferguson? They were like, we want the damn laws changed. We want these interaction rates changed. We want these siphoning of our funds from this government. We want it to change. That is legitimately what they were saying. They were asking for a conservative answer to a legitimately localized problem.
Right.
And they were never offered that answer. Right. Republicans and conservatives, you to this day, still have not offered that answer. But you know who did? Cori Bush. So now you have one of the most radical new members of Congress coming out of that area because there was no conservative voice offered. There was no alternative offered. If we do not go in and start filling these spaces, filling these vacuums, filling these voids, the most extreme ones that show up and say, we will take this fight on. We will be the standard bearers, the torch bearers for the next round going forward. Those are the people that are going to be rewarded and be put into office. So you had this entire time period. And if you just look at it from a philosophy point of view, you had the federal government using the police force as a taxation squad.
Yeah.
No conservative should look at that and say that that is acceptable. You also have this report being released from Obama's DOJ, Eric Holder releasing this report. And that was your perfect moment to say, this is what progressivism looks like. This is what your policies create. This is what your ideology forces on people. But instead of making that argument, making that principled argument, making that argument on the ideas, making that argument on principle, we stayed on Mike Brown. And that is the problem. Yet and still, rather than taking on the government, the actual arbiter of force, you would rather pick on a person and an individual. And that's not judging right or wrong or any of that by Mike Brown. The question is, what do you think is the biggest culprit, Mike Brown or that government?
There you go.
And if you think that that government is the biggest culprit, then why isn't that government getting the bulk of the attention as opposed to the individual?
Perfect. Amen. I have nothing to add to that. That's like, I mean, I'll add. The only thing I'll add to that is, I'm thinking Eric Garner, right? A lot of the laws that are on the necks of people, not just Black people, by the way, but working class people, poor people in this country that are on the necks of people, were written by progressive city council members.
And it does such a disservice to the police officers, and especially the good police officers, because I believe in law enforcement. That is what keeps us in a civilized kind of society, that we all have these basic laws of functions that we agree with. We give these specific people the ability to I believe in that system. But what I don't believe in is not being able to hold these people accountable, not being able to question them, not being able to actually be assertive in making sure that they are held accountable for how they treat the citizens. There are two types of police forces, right? You have the law and order police force. So whatever the law is, they're gonna punch it through. They don't care about our rights. They don't care about our freedoms. They don't care about our Constitution. They don't care how we feel about it as citizens. They don't care. They are law and order, whatever the law is, bam. Then there are the police officers that are protect and serve. Okay, so the protect part is law and order. They still believe in law and order, but they believe in the service part of it. So they believe in looking at the citizen and first seeing if there's a need above the law. If there is a circumstance to be of service before you are of punishment, to be of the community before you are an enforcement of it. And I'll give you a quick example of it. So if you take a kid and he's spray painting right on the wall, and a law and order cop comes along. A law and order cop says, you're spray painting on the wall. I'm going to arrest you, take you downtown. We're going to put you through the whole process. A protect and serve officer says, I'm not going to arrest you. I'm going to take you home. I'm going to tell your parents what you did. And I'm going to let your parents have, we'll work out something with your parents that'll bring you back to the school for you to clean this up tomorrow. And that's how we're going to solve this. We're not going to put you in the system. That's a protect and serve police officers. In a lot of white communities, especially heavily conservative communities, you have protect and serve police officers.
Right.
I am happy for you. You know what I'm saying?
Yep.
God bless you, and God bless those police officers. In heavily democratic areas, there are not protect and serve police officers.
Wow.
There are law and order.
That's right.
Police officers. And there is no law that a progressive does not like to put on the books that will give them more power over the citizens. So if you look at the totality of the laws that they have on the book that force police citizen interactions, you will start to see why these two different models of police officers, or police forces, I should say, are a better barometer of what kind of unrest you're going to have in your city, as opposed to the police officers themselves. It's more about the ideology and the philosophy that pushes them forward. Are they protect and serve, or are they just law and order?
It was just over 6 years ago. It was about Thanksgiving of 2014 when I was in a really deep and dark hole. I was experiencing obsessive thoughts, round-the-clock anxiety, and terrible insomnia, and I couldn't find a way out of it. I had done years of psychotherapy at that point, and none of that work seemed to matter. Didn't help me. Didn't make me feel better. Many people had told me over the years to try meditating, but I just never did it. Don't know why, just never did it. But finally, I was suffering so much that I thought I'd give it a try. And I saw an ad for a free 1-month trial to this thing called Headspace, which I had heard about, a mindfulness meditation app. So I gave it a shot. 10 minutes later, this is after the very first session, I felt like my body chemistry had changed. I did it then every day for about a year. And I've been doing it off and on, I wish, all the time since then. But during that year of meditating regularly, I got rid of those obsessive thoughts. My anxiety declined dramatically, and I could sleep much better. Almost more importantly, at any moment in the day, the tools that Headspace Mindfulness gave me allowed me to settle myself, to calm myself, to center myself, regardless of what was going on around me and what was going on in my mind. Those are tools that I will use for the rest of my life. I use them every day. Mindfulness meditation, the way it was taught to me by Headspace, is the most powerful tool for psychological self-help I have ever encountered, and it is worth far more than all those years I spent in therapy. So go to headspace.com/renegade and get that very same free 1-month trial that I got back in 2014, the one that changed my life. Again, go to headspace.com/renegade for your free 1-month trial to the wonderful mindfulness meditation app, Headspace. Thank you.
Right. So you've talked a lot about this a lot. I've talked about it a lot. There are all these laws that put cops in the lives of people. And these laws, you've said, I think are unnecessary. At least it's unnecessary for the cops to be serving those functions in society. And certainly as tax collectors, like in Ferguson and many other cities, right? Why on earth do you think is it that Republicans and conservatives have not been opposed to those laws? Because many of them, as I said, are progressive laws.
They're not thinking about those laws. They're thinking about the laws in their city.
Okay.
So, or their town. Their perspective is not what those laws are doing to the people that live under them. It's that we like our laws the way that they are. Our laws are fine. So if our laws are fine, then your laws have to be fine. And no, that's not like why do I have to sit and explain a republic to conservatives?
I know.
Why do I have to explain to you how this works? Because your police force is great. Every single police officer that said, or police force that said they would not enforce the mask law, I love you. I have the most respect for you and honor for you. Every single one that said we are not going to arrest our citizens for opening up their businesses, I love you. I got you. But do you realize that in other cities, they were actually sending task force out to write tickets for people? They were actually setting up stings to try to set people up to get tickets. There is a difference between the ideology in an area that's based more off of freedom than a progressive stronghold that's based off of death, poverty, and destruction. And I should not have to sit and explain that simple fact to someone that calls himself a conservative.
It's incredible. I mean, it just seems to me like conservatives and even Republicans, if they started to attack some of these laws that put cops in the faces of Black people every single day, they might gain real traction among African Americans and get some votes.
Definitely would.
Okay.
Definitely would.
Okay.
And for the simple fact that it would mean you were listening.
Yeah.
Like, for the simple fact, it would mean you were listening. And instead of looking at a complaint from a Black person as identity politics, you could look at it as an actual policy discussion that needs a political solution in order to solve it. And if we started looking at our fellow American citizens as American citizens, like they say they do when they ask me to be colorblind, then we would not continuously have this discussion.
I love it. Now, let's see if we're going to have an argument here. What about the law or the set of laws that many of us think are responsible for bringing the most violence and devastation to poor and especially Black communities, the drug laws? What do you think about the war on drugs?
First and foremost, and I have to start off this way, for anybody who is a responsible drug user, be responsible. One of the biggest reasons that we constantly lose this fight is because you act irresponsibly. Okay. And one of the main things that I have is specifically talking about weed and marijuana or whatever, is not letting the youth partake, making sure if your younger cousin, your younger Wody on the block, whatever, if they are not doing the right things with their life, don't smoke with them, don't hang with them, don't let them get near you while you're being responsible and they're being irresponsible. If we don't want government in this, then we have to be the metric that sets the layer for responsibility. So if we are responsible and if we make sure we are looking out for our youth that come up under us and we are doing it properly, then we take that role away from government. And I think that that's the way it should operate. So before I do any discussion about drugs, that's always where I start. First and foremost, if you're going to be a user, be responsible and make sure you're taking care of the youth and the people that are around you, so that they can grow up and be responsible as well. Okay, so now with that being said, okay, I am against the drug laws. Of course I am. Okay. But let's talk about why I'm so against them, right? So why I'm so against them, first and foremost, is they took the eye off of the real problem. Okay, so the real problem was the effects of redlining. The real problem was the unionization that left Black workers out. The real problem was putting highways through our communities and thereby limited jobs from allowing people from the suburbs to come in and take them. Like, those were the real problems. And those problems were never solved. So when drugs came in, because of those problems, as people try to numb themselves from the situation and circumstances as it was set, then drugs became the problem. So it's easier to focus on drugs and say no to drugs and have a war on drugs than to actually solve the economic woes that put that community into that position in the first place. So that's the thing that ticks me off the most about the war on drugs, is that it actually took the emphasis off of the economic struggle that started all of the problems in the first place. So redlining was allowed to continue because everybody was focusing on drugs and not the detrimental effects of redlining. I would have much rather got rid of redlining than introduce new drug laws. And I think we would have been better as a Black community if it had went that way instead of the other way. So that's like the number one reason that I'm against the drug laws. And again, of course, how they were unequally distributed. And I don't even so much as look at it so much as a racial kind of thing. It's a poverty kind of thing. So if you're Black and you're doing a whole bunch of coke, and like, nobody cares about that either. It's when you're Black and you're poor that it becomes a problem. So that's where the emphasis more came in. And again, the more they talked about the drugs, the more they defined us by the drugs, the more they defined us by the violence. The actual question of the economic depression that was going on in our communities just continued to saunter and to fester. And it just continues to generationally repatriate itself into our community because the economic root of that problem was never solved in the first place.
Wow. Woo. Okay, now we'll talk about your answers to those economic problems, those economic injustices, right? Which are not the progressive answers. We'll get to that, I'm sure. But so let me tell you. So I know you're a big fan of history, American history, and I'm a historian, so I want to talk a little bit about that too. So back in the 1920s, when alcohol was illegal, the biggest drug, which was then alcohol dealing gangs, weren't Black. They were Italian and Jewish. They were Italian and Jewish gangs who did almost all the dealing of alcohol, of distributing of alcohol, right? And that's because then they were immigrants who didn't give a shit about America, right? They didn't have any identification with the United States of America. It wasn't their country yet, right? They had just gotten here. They spoke a different language, different culture. So people come along and they're like, yeah, alcohol is bad. They're like, not in my country. Well, I'm going to still sell this, right? Because they didn't feel a part of the United States yet, right? These are Jews and Italians. Okay, so now along comes the 1960s. We have a new war on drugs against the powdered kind, right? And the green kind too. And at that point, the Jews and Italians had assimilated and become American citizens and were fully identified as Americans, et cetera, for the most part. But Black people in this country had not yet, for the most part, felt like this was their country. You have two American.
No, we do.
Wait a minute. Let me finish though. So you got two American flags behind you. And so clearly you do, but let's get into this. I mean, my thesis, you heard it already, but let me say it. So my thesis is that even to this day, there's a significant portion of the African-American population, and to me, this is a good thing, who have not identified with the United States. And that is one of the reasons. Your reasons were very important too, but that's one of the reasons that Black people beginning in the 60s were willing to enter the drug trade, because they're like, this isn't my country. These are my laws, not my morality. Does that make any sense?
No.
Okay, go for it.
What? Okay, so if I have a cup of water, right? And I pour the water in front of you. You watch me pour the water. I take poison. I tell you this is poison. And I pour it into the water. What would make you drink the water? What would make you, after you have sat and watched me pour it in crystal clear? You could have had it at that point. What was crystal clear? You could have had it, but I poured poison in. What would make you drink it?
Nothing. You
would have to be so thirsty that you did not give a damn about the consequences.
Yeah, okay.
That was Black America.
Right.
Is that it wasn't that we did not feel we were a part of America. We were just at the point where we no longer gave a damn about the consequences. If it is, and you have to look at this, what were we being offered? We were being offered progressivism. right? So they're offer us public schools, you got public housing, you got public welfare, like you got basic medical aid, like everything that they said was supposed to make sure your life was that you were able to live a life of liberty and freedom. You have it all.
Right.
Why would you still drink the water? Because that's not enough. That's not what you want. What you want is that water before the poison went in. What you want is that liberty. What you want is that freedom. What you want is to maybe decide you don't want water and you want vodka, or you want something else. Maybe that's what you want, to not just be handed something and automatically told that that is what you have to accept. So what the drug trade became Black America's access to capitalism.
Oh, okay.
So we are under this progressive domination.
Yeah.
They're not allowing us growth. They're not allowing us economic freedom. They're not allowing us to have upward mobility. No, but the drug trade did.
Okay.
So we would risk life, liberty, freedom. We would risk it all to get it all.
Wow.
And that's what you started to see come out of the Black community.
Okay, I got you. I that point makes a lot of sense to me.
If you're a regular listener of this show, there's a very good chance you're a big fan of cryptocurrency. There's also a pretty good chance that you would like to work in cryptocurrency, perhaps the fastest growing industry in the world, certainly one of them. Now, I happen to know about a company that has grown so fast recently because of the increased customer demand for crypto that they've had to add many new jobs in customer service and web development, and they want me to get the word out to unregistered listeners because they have jobs for you. These jobs pay $50,000 a year. They come with full medical and dental benefits. You get 30 days off full paid leave per year. You can get paid in Bitcoin. This is an opportunity that many people are looking for, but for unregistered listeners, you're the only ones with this particular opportunity. So email my friend. His name is Luke. He's a headhunter for this company, and he wants to fill those jobs fast. His email address is workcrypto21@gmail.com. Again, email workcrypto21@gmail.com for a job and very possibly a career in cryptocurrency. Thank you.
But would you not agree with me that African Americans in general, on average, are less patriotic than whites? That they're going to be less likely to have American flags in their homes like you do? Really? No?
No. I like this is the thing. We have people on the left that constantly shout white supremacy, right, all of this crap. And then you have people on the right who are like, we don't even like, what is Black history at all? Why would we, you know what I'm saying? Like when you have, those are your two paradigms. When in actual Black America, at least my Black America, because I'm ADOS, so I can trace my lineage back to slavery. So I know Hotep likes to make the point that Black people were here before the first slave boats came. Cool. My people came over on the slave boats. You know what I'm saying? And I know my lineage. Yep. So we came in one of the first Black churches to be created in Virginia, in Midlothian, Virginia. That's the church that I was baptized in. You know what I'm saying? We bought up, me and my family, well, not me, but my family, we bought a lot of the land that was once slave, that was once worked under slavery. We owned big old swash of land that we that our family once were slaves on that land. Wow. Our church is still there. Like, this is our country. This is our history. This is our nation. And I am not going to let Republicans or Democrats make us feel like we have not done everything every single decade to make sure that is so, and that is the case. So those people that are pushing that now and kind of perpetrating that now, catch them on the 4th of July. They'll still have on their red, white, and blue. They're still going to the cookout. They're still participating. They know that they are born in the best country on the face of this earth, and they ain't running to move anywhere else. The problem is that country listening and responding to them? So when we get to that point, I can start agreeing with them. But to negate our history here, to negate our record here, our lineage here, our legacy here, not a chance in hell. There is no American fabric without Black America.
For sure. I'm just talking about why Black people might be less sympathetic to cops than whites, right? Because why they might be less sympathetic, why they might be more suspicious of the government, right? Because of what the government's done to them, right? That's what I'm saying.
If you take a percentage of a vote of Black people understand why the police are there. They understand that they need to be there. They don't want them defunded and kicked out and removed from society. Because then we know we're going to have to mess with amongst us. We understand that all of us are not good. We understand that there are bad amongst us, and we too need to be protected, especially when we're living in cities with all of these gun restrictions and gun laws that don't allow us the ability to protect and defend ourselves. So most Black people are not against the police. What we are against is a system that does not have to answer to anyone. A system that is never held to account when Black bodies are killed. A system that says that isn't a big enough problem for us to care about. And I am a person that believes, again, in the idea of the individual. So that one increment is enough for me to care about it. And I don't care if it's a white man or a Chinese man or a Hispanic woman. I don't care. When it is a question of the state, the entire state against a single individual, I am always going to hold the state more accountable for the power it possesses than I will ever hold that single individual accountable.
All right. I like it. I love it. I love it. I love it. I'm learning. I'm thinking, man, you're stretching me. I like it. So we're going to talk about history. We already have a little bit of the United States. I want to do more of that, but I want to talk about the history of Sonnie Johnson too. Can we do that?
Okay.
And I've heard you talk about your own personal history a bit. So I know you're at least have been willing with other people to go into it. A lot of it's painful, and a lot of it is heroic, what you came out of and where you are now, So you're from Richmond, Virginia. You know who else is from Richmond, Virginia, Sonnie Johnson?
Who?
Steve Bannon.
Yes. He's from North Side. I'm from the South Side.
He said he's from some Black neighborhood. Is that true? I don't know.
I don't know about that, but I do know he told me he was born in Richmond.
Yeah, he talks about it a lot. And you had some, this is not your history, I'm jumping ahead here, but you had some connection with Bannon at some point, right?
Actually, he's the one who hired me at Breitbart.
Okay, right. Oh, yeah.
So,
Breitbart. Right. Yeah.
Yeah. So he's the one who hired me and brought me on to Breitbart. Actually, it was a funny story. The very first speech I ever gave was at a tea party in Roanoke, Virginia, and I was like batshit because I was like, yo, these white people is about to woo, it was something to behold. And so I go out and I give the speech and it's a standing ovation, everything. And I was like, okay, this is kind of cool. And I went home. A few days later, Bannon's assistant called me. How he got my number, tracked me down, I have no clue. But his assistant called me and was like, I'm doing this documentary. I would love to have you come in and shoot this documentary with me. And I'm like, oh my gosh. So I went from one speech to going in and shooting a documentary with Steve Bannon. So I went and shot the documentary, and me and Bannon ended up talking for 2, 3, 4 hours. Just subject after subject after subject, idea after idea after idea. And he gave me one piece of advice. He told me, never let them take away that which makes you great. And it took me a minute to understand what he meant by that, and how influential just that single piece of advice would be on everything that I would do following that. And it turns out that the reason that he contacted me was his sister was sitting in the audience when I gave that first speech. So while I finished, she called him and was like, there's this girl on the stage, you need to talk to her. And then she let him hear the crowd that was reacting to me. And so that's how he decided to call me in.
How long were you with
So that's how I met Benny.
How long?
I'm still at Breitbart.
Oh, you are? Oh, okay. But you have your own show. I think of you as having your own shows now.
Yeah, I do on SiriusXM Patriot. It's still a part of Breitbart's network.
Oh, oh, I see. I got it. I didn't know that. Gotcha. So yeah, so you have a history of Steve Bannon, both Richmond, Virginia, the sons and daughters of Richmond, Virginia, as are a lot of other famous people in this country. So, all right. So you're born there, and you've talked about your mother quite a bit, and well, just tell us, like, what was your childhood and your parents, and who were they, and what was it like?
Well, my biological mother was a drug addict. So I was removed from her care when I was very, very young. She left me in a house with my sisters, 4 years old, and she was trying to take care of me the best she could. And my grandmother came to check on us, found us, called my dad. My dad came and got me. My dad was still, young and running the streets, couldn't really take care of a baby on his own. So he gave me to his brother's girlfriend. And she became my guardian angel. She was my mom. She raised me. She never treated me like I was anything other than her daughter. She kept my foot. She kept her foot in my butt when necessary. She kept my head in my studies. She made sure I revered God and loved him. She was just the greatest blessing that I could ever have asked for. Definitely my angel. And so life growing up, we split between the public housing in Richmond and between the country in Chesterfield. So like I said, my family, we still owned a lot of the land that we used to work as slaves. And we would spend our time split between that area and the housing projects in Richmond. And that was my dynamic. I got to see both sides of it. I just got to see poverty from both sides. So you got to see urban poverty and you got to see country poverty. And definitely if I had to choose a poverty, I would choose country poverty. Because once you can grow your own stuff and you can have your own animals and you can go fishing and you can go hunting and you can stack your freezer. That is how I grew up. So if you're definitely going to pick one, that's definitely the one that you would want to pick. Until I got into my teenage years, and then it was all urban. I wanted to be in the city, running the streets, so and I did a lot of that.
You got a sense of that, the self-sufficiency that's required in rural poverty. You got a sense of that?
Yes, most definitely.
Which of course like jibes perfectly with conservative thought, right?
Yeah, if you don't get up and do the things necessary to make sure you have food, then you don't have food. And we kind of really, like my house growing up in the country, we didn't even have running water. Wow. So we literally had to go to a well to pump water, to be able to take a bath, to cook, to do all of that. And this is like, I'm still alive to this day saying, yes, this is how I lived growing up. No bathrooms, no running water.
Damn.
Roughing it.
That's like the pioneers who settled the country. See, you are American.
Yeah, most definitely. And fishing and hunting and growing your own vegetables. You know what I'm saying? It was really funny when I got to the city, and one of the euphemisms at the time was what Black people was calling people chicken heads. And it was funny to them. And I'm like, yo, I have legitimately seen the chicken when he gets his head cut off and he runs away. So to me, it takes on a whole different image than just saying chicken head. I've like literally cut the head off of a chicken and watched it run. So it kind of means a little bit different when you actually went through it.
Yeah, no, that's got to have something to do with your subsequent intellectual and political development, right?
Something I
Yeah,
don't know how the stars align on that one, but I'm pretty sure it's relevant somehow.
gotta be. Yeah, well, I think I just said it. Like you lived sort of the idea, in some ways, the idealized conservative life, right? The yeoman farmer out on his own in the countryside, having to pull water out of the ground to drink, etc. Right? I mean, damn, you got
It's fun. Like it
yeah.
sounds funny now, but I remember one of my fondest memories where I was so proud of is that I went a whole summer with no shoes. Like I went an entire summer with no shoes, and my feet were so rough that I could run on rocks. And at the end of the summer, the fact that I did that I had accomplished that was like, yay, me. It was like something to be celebrated. So
Yeah,
that's like one of my best childhood memories is the fact that I literally spent an entire summer with no shoes.
that's like you now. Your feet are so rough you can run across not just rocks but hot rocks,
I try. I
right?
try.
Right?
I
That's kind
try.
that's kind of your life. Because even when you go talk to the conservatives and Republicans, you're always cutting against the grain. You're always like walking on hot rocks.
But I think that is too, is that I think a lot of Republicans and conservatives have lost critical thinking, and
Yeah.
it's very, very integral to what we do, is that we have to be able to think through problems critically. We can't say the lowest hanging fruit is good enough for me, let's just stay there. Like that is what has gotten us to this point now, where we're not continuing the discussion, we're not making sure our ideas are advanced, our
Mhm.
ideology is
Mhm.
pushed to the forefront. We kind of stay on the lowest bottom hanging fruit because it just seems easier that way. So I think I'm giving the gift of critical thinking. And if you want to say that it is a non-gift of triggering, I bet you thought about it.
Yep. Yep. Now, you clearly have a very powerful analytical mind. Where do you think it comes from? Or maybe it's just yours. Maybe it's just something we can never explain. Just God gave it to you and that's the end of it. Or do you think it's from other influences? Where
Um, I would say definitely God bless me. I would not be here if it weren't for him. I would not be, and wait a minute, I wouldn't have survived teenagers, my teenage
Mhm.
years if it wasn't for him. I
Mhm.
definitely wouldn't be here if it wasn't for him. I wouldn't have continued if it wasn't for him, because there's plenty of times where I was going to quit and walk away, and God would just open a door for me. And I was like, okay, I can't not walk through that door, because I did promise I would give him my life. And if this is what he wants me to do, if this is where he wants me to be, then I'm going to stay in and I'm going to fight like hell while I'm here. And the good part is, I feel like in our personal relationship, he's never asked me to stop being myself.
Mhm.
Like, I made you, I know who you are, I know what your voice is, I know what it sounds like, I know all of that, and I still want to use you for this purpose. And I think, like, as long as that relationship is so solid, why would you ever try to go against that I can genuinely be myself, I can genuinely love and care for the people that really need the love and care the most, and that's colorblind across the spectrum. I can really love them and kind of look out for them and guide them while still being myself and not having to fake and not having to pretend. And that's just been the biggest blessing that God could ever give me. So for that fact alone, I continue to do it. So
Huh. So I was born an atheist and now I'm an agnostic. So I don't really have a position on this. And in other words, I don't think you're wrong or right about any of this. But I will tell you,
oh, I don't
but I'll
I
just tell you,
don't
let
make
me,
religious arguments. I don't make political arguments based
yeah,
on religion.
no, I know.
That was just a personal me thing.
Oh, I know. Yeah. I was just going to tell you that I have never felt the blessing that you've felt. And I mean that. I mean, like, whether you're right or wrong about the existence of God doesn't matter. You feel it. You feel it, and you have felt this your whole life, and you feel like it's guided you and moved you in directions that have been very positive for you. And I just,
Well, if since you want to get to the life of Sonny, I'll give you something.
yeah.
Um, when I was 16, I was told I would never be able to have kids. Right, which it wasn't really a big deal because I didn't want to have kids. So, you know what I'm saying? It was whatever.
Wait, you didn't want to? You didn't
me
want
and
to?
my stepmother.
You knew you didn't want to have kids when you were
No,
16?
I wasn't like into. I didn't plan a marriage. I didn't have like the wedding of my dreams in my head. Like none of that. Marriage, children, none of that was kind of on my radar. I was seriously just like running the streets and having a good time.
Okay.
And then I got struck with Crohn's, and so that kind of made it so I couldn't run the streets because I was spending a lot of time sick, a lot of time in the hospital. So it really kind of hampered my running street time, which I think saved my life.
Yeah.
And in that moment, you don't know that it's saving your life because you want to run the street. And so me and God started to connect again because me and my stepmother had a really bad relationship. And when I was about 15 or so, she came to me and she was like, well, God told me that he wanted me and you to have a relationship. And I was like, well, if God is telling you that, then I don't need to talk to God. And it was kind of my breaking point where I stopped going to church. I stopped being as devoted as I had been in my youth. And so Crohn's came around and it was, woe is me, God this, God that. It was complain. I met my husband, I got pregnant, and I miscarried. After that one, it was like, okay, God, listen. You know, now you start bargaining with God. Like, forget all that other stuff that I said. You know, all that stuff I said and all that stuff I did before, I didn't mean it. Let's talk. You know what I'm saying? Like, you let me bring this baby into this world. You let me carry this child full term. Whatever you ask of me, whatever you want me to do, I am going to do it.
Oh boy.
Found out I was pregnant the same day my mom had a brain aneurysm and died.
Oh, wow.
So I'm like, okay, God, you're not going to make this easy on me. You know what I'm saying? And I am literally having these fights out loud because I don't care anymore. I'm like at that place where I'm like, if we're going to bargain, we're going to bargain. So I have my daughter's healthy, she's growing. And I'm like, okay, God, what do you got for me? Tea party. No. Republicans.
No.
You have lost your damn mind. No. Now, God, I know I said I would do anything. But no. So like I was straight up like, no, not a chance in hell. I promise you, everything in my life started to crumble. I was getting into fights with my husband. Me and my daughter my little one was beefing. Me and my family were beefing. Everything I was trying to work on, nothing would work out. Like everything just started going wrong. And I was like, okay, you know what? Fine, God, this what you want? You can have it, but I'm gonna do it my way. I'm gonna be everything, you know what I'm saying? And he was like, fine. That's what I want you to be. And I stopped fighting, and here we are now. So when you talk about the feeling, sometimes it's just you being okay with understanding mistakes, understanding your own limited knowledge. And sometimes, even if you don't look at it in a sense of it being God, sometimes just the universe pays you back for being a good person and doing the right thing and being the kind of person that other people look up to and flock towards. And those kind of things, that's the spirit. You know what I'm saying? That's the feeling. At least when I look at it.
Now, you said you met your husband back then when you were a teenager?
I met my husband when I was 20.
Okay, 20.
So,
yeah. This is the husband you're still with?
Yes. Me and him have been together. I've spent more of my life with him than without him.
Wow. And I've heard you say very, very nice things about him too. Is this still true?
I love him.
That's
He is my best friend. He is my biggest fan. When I was petrified the first time to give my speech, he was like, just show up. He was like, all you have to do is show up. Just show up and I will show up with you. So every first that I have ever had, he's shown up with me. So it's the first time I did TV, the first time I did radio, the first, every single first that I have ever had, he's shown up with me. And he's like, if I can do that, if I can show up that first time with you, then you'll know that every time you show up consequently after that, that you're going to be okay. So he is the best father, the best husband. I could not have asked for a better partner in life.
You don't hear that very often, right? That is something you don't hear at all.
And he's handsome and he's sexy and he's so like he's just got all that going for him.
Damn, who is this guy? Now you've said the two most important things in your life, even though you're obviously very passionate about politics and ideas and history and all this stuff, is being a wife and a mother.
Most definitely.
Yeah. How old is how old is your daughter now?
She's 16 now. She just got her learner's permit. So she's going out. And when I was about her age, my mom was like, if you ever do have a kid, that kid's gonna drive you fucking crazy for everything you've done to me. Everything you've done to me is gonna come back on you.
Right.
And like one of the reasons I didn't want kids at that point, because I was like, well, damn, you know what I'm saying? I don't want to have to deal with me.
Right.
And she just isn't. She is like equal parts the best of me and the best of her father. So smart, so sweet, so funny, so caring, genuinely concerned about other people, while at the same time very, very not into dealing with a whole bunch of nonsense. So you're not going to talk her into doing something that she knows is wrong. She's just an awesome kid. And again, like I love, like, this is the thing when people try to say like I'm jealous or I'm like, it's something out in the world that I want and I'm mad that I can't have it. No, I have everything I want. I am a blessed and highly favored, very lucky woman, and I love the life that God has given me, and it's good for me. So it's not, believe me, it's no other life out there that I'm desperately seeking or wanting. I'm very, very happy with my own.
And all I am is envious. I mean, you love your husband, you love your daughter, you love what you do. Yeah, you're good. This is not coming from a place of envy, which is, by the way, a lot of people, and I'm going to say it, a lot of people on the left, that's where their politics comes from envy, right? Envy of rich people, envy of things that they imagine rich people have, right? And then that becomes resentment, and that becomes anger, and that becomes destructiveness, right?
Well, it's kind of funny because it's envy from the people at the bottom, and from the people at the top, it's not envy. It's guilt. And or not even guilt, it's self-righteousness. I would put it more in that term. It's self-righteousness that I can get to this position but you never could. So I have to make sure that I give you scraps to make you feel like you're equal to me, so we can go around and say this whole equality thing. I like to call it like the liberal equation, right? So you have the white liberal and you have the black person, you have equal mark in the middle, right? The white liberal says, but you have to add something to the black to make us equal. So you have to add welfare, or you have to add healthcare, or you have to add to these people in order to make them equal to us.
That's right.
Because if you don't add to them, then these are the oppressed and we are the high. And it is really a psychology that they believe. They really, really believe it. And that's why some of my favorite people to argue with are like white progressives, especially white progressive men, because it is the shortest argument you will ever have. As soon as they say anything, I'm like, shut up with your white privilege. Like shut your white supremacy up. You know, why are you talking with your white guilt lips? I just don't understand. Or if you really want to have this discussion, empty your entire bank account. I want the deed to your house. I want the 401k. Like I want it all. If you actually believe in oppression and believe that you are so much better than me, prove it. Show me it's real. Run them numbers. And you know, that really just stops the conversation altogether. But when you simplify it and say that they're just looking at it as envy, then you're only signaling the people at the bottom. You're not defining what the people at the top are looking for.
Oh yeah.
What the people at the top are looking for is to add some variables to your side of the equation, so one day you could possibly equal them.
Oh, for sure. Yeah. I was talking about like the left wing. It's not just white. Left wing hatred of the rich is based on envy. I wasn't talking about liberals' attitudes towards black people, which is
but see, that's the thing. They are rich, so they don't hate the rich. Like they're not going to stop buying Louis Vuitton. They're not going to stop visiting or taking a cruise ship out for 2 weeks with all of that. They do not hate the rich. What they have done is shielded themselves so they aren't exposed as the rich. And here's the problem.
Okay.
So if you look at, just take the middle class, and this for Black America should say everything. So a lot of Black America work their way up into a middle class lifestyle. Mm-hmm. So when we have this conversation about the rich, those people tend to look at the people above them and say, oh yes, we can go after the rich. But when you were in the hood, were you complaining about the people in the mansions or the people in the suburbs? Right. You were complaining about the people in the suburbs, not the people in the mansions. Understand the difference. So now that you are in the suburbs, you look rich to the people that are still in the hood. So it's all about understanding that spectrum of rich. The really, really rich people, mm-hmm. They don't hate the rich. They don't despise the rich. They have tried to shield themselves from being rich. So if they can throw enough variables on your side, they can keep their money and you can still be equal.
Okay.
That's the whole point of the equation. It's never going to balance us out. It's never going to give equity of income, which I don't believe in or agree with.
Right.
But that's what they're talking about, that there's somehow going to be this equity or this balance. It will never occur. They will always keep their money and you will always have whatever variable they tossed over to you at the moment.
Right. And so white liberals think of Black people as being fundamentally deficient and needing things added to their lives, to their worlds, to their neighborhoods, to their schools that are provided, and I've heard you say this many times, by the federal government, preferably for the white liberal, right? Mm-hmm. Which is a system of paternalism in which the government becomes the dad. Is that right? Is that how you see it?
And I think that it's more now at this point, just for our destruction, because I think that they have realized that we're never going to be satisfied with their progressivism. I think that that's what you're seeing right now as all of these riots break out in all of these Black areas. Basically, the Democrats, they're like, what haven't we done for you? Like, we've given you everything we could give you along with our progressive ideology. Why aren't you happy? Like, you have free public schools. You have all of this stuff. Why are you not happy? Right. And I think that they have figured out Black America will never be happy with progressivism. We will never
Oh.
settle quietly into progressivism. We will never fit into that mold. And I think the most destructive force in that has been hip hop, has been our culture. That's like, yo, no, man, we can change the weather. We can change the circumstance. We can change the situation. That has made it virtually impossible for this idea of stagnancy that's pushed by progressivism to actually get in and take hold and root this generation of Black America. So I think that Democrats see it now too and realize they have created a monster that they cannot control and that will never be satisfied. And Black America is saying equivocally, what you have given us for 100 years in the form of progressivism, it does not satisfy what we look at as acceptable government, and we want something different. As soon as conservatives actually see that and understand that and realize what that means and offers a damn choice, I think you're going to see the most just fundamentally skyrocketing ideological change in the Black community since the Harlem Renaissance.
Whoa. Wow. You mentioned hip hop. What you just said is amazing. I'm going to process that while I'm asking you this question, but you've mentioned hip hop many times here and in other interviews and on your own show many times as being very important for you in your intellectual development, right? And now what I've heard Black conservatives for about, 30 years complaining nonstop about hip hop. Hip hop for them has been maybe the major source of the problems in the Black community, right? Because hip hop puts forward all these toxic ideas about masculinity and bitches and hoes and drug running and yada, yada, right? This has been the black conservative line. Hip hop has been like a primary target, maybe even more than progressivism for them, right? Since the 1980s. You know this. Now you're a Black conservative. You identify as a Black conservative, but you sure are not that, right? You have a very different view of hip hop. Talk about hip hop.
I love hip hop. So I look at first and foremost, like I said, when I first started, I wasn't looking, I just wanted to start a blog. This is how like all this started. I just started with a blog. It wasn't a political blog. It was a Black woman looking at her community and thinking, how can we solve some of the problems that we see? It wasn't Democrat, it wasn't Republican, it had nothing to freaking do with that. But one of the main examples or kind of scenarios that I was given during that time period is what hip hop had done under the Bush tax cuts. So this is coming at the beginning of the end of the Bush administration, the beginning when Obama was running for office. What Black America had done with the Bush tax cuts. So if you looked at Black America during that time period, every rapper had a clothing line. They were opening a restaurant. They were diversifying into real estate. They were starting to invest into different branded. And I was like, wait a minute. So once you got money, you can get money to invest money. And when money is moving fluently, a lot more money moves through our community. Now, what if we did this a lot more regularly and kept that dollar rotating in that community for more cycles? Would we start to see some of our systemic generational economic problems to solve themselves? So that's literally where I started looking at that idea, is just seeing how when money is fluid and it moves through us, we make it move again. Why can't we do that in our own community? Why can't we keep that process circulating around? And that became the thesis for everything that I was doing. Everything had to rotate back to how do we get our people towards economic independence? Because once they have that independence, what they create will mesmerize, innovate, and change the world. Like where we are now is not a space of creation, it's a space of destruction. It's not a space of life, it's a space of death. It's not a space of growth, it's a space of poverty. Get us from that. And I'm not even talking about in physical location. I'm talking about in ideological terms of what is possible. Get us from that and get us into the mode of being innovative, being creative, being a driving force. Time and time again, Black America has shown by every cultural stance that we are able to make that push in a dynamic, phenomenal way that the world pays attention to. If we take that culture, find our intellectual ideology within the culture, we don't have to create it. We don't have to teach it. We don't have to, we don't have to preach it. We don't have to reshape it. We don't have to do any of that. All we have to do is find what is already there. So the biggest influence on why I am a conservative is Jay-Z. It's not Rush Limbaugh. It's not William Buckley. It's not any of them. The first influence that actually had me looking at these things and actually thinking about them on a philosophical level was your single was 99 cents. Mine was $4. Okay, so why would your CD be $4 and the other one be $1? Like, what would be necessary for that price difference? Of course, your name brand, how hot you are, your availability, like all of those things. That was the very first time I ever just stopped and thought about economics and how they function. So that is, Jay-Z has given an entire generation that aspiration. So if you look at hip hop now, from Nipsey Hussle to Rick Ross to 50 Cent, so any of the ones that are really, really on that hustle game, they'll say, I talked to Jay-Z and Jay-Z told me to do this with my money, to watch my money like this, to grow my money like this, to invest my money like this, to stack my money like this, to think differently about how I work with my money. So if you're looking at this generation and you're wondering why the capitalistic economic swing that you see is now prevalent, it has much more to do with Jay-Z than anybody else on the political spectrum, hands down, bar none.
Wow. Hip hop artists, rappers, and producers are, I think, pretty much all entrepreneurs. And most of them, or many of them, have been entrepreneurs since they were teenagers.
So, and I'm sitting here, I'm like, okay, you're a capitalist and you rather argue with these people than have a discussion with them about intellectual property. Like, what is wrong with you? Like, and you are conservative. Talk to these conservatives about their intellectual property, their property, their holdings, their creations, talk to them about that and protecting that and defending that and making sure they are paid top dollar for it and not tax top dollar for it. Like, all of that is your discussion, but you can't have that discussion because you would much rather blame hip hop for problems that were already present when hip hop was created. Like, this progressivism, hip hop came out of New York. New York was also the birthplace of progressivism. It is where all of these sick ideas came from in the first place. Is there any wonder that hip hop was born from it? And out of that, what was the first things that hip hop was complaining about? They were complaining about the shitty jobs. They were complaining about the shitty education. They was complaining about the over policing and burdensome laws. They were complaining about everything progressives had done to their community. And instead of Republicans and conservatives listening to what was being said, they turned around and blamed hip hop just because Black people don't like them. And that's the problem with Black Republicans and conservatives. Why they want hip hop to be the villain so bad is because they can't connect with it. They can't find a place in it. They can't find a home in it. It doesn't accept them. So it automatically has to be bad. So in one sense, they are right. Because if they're saying that hip hop is their biggest impediment to reaching the Black community, it is. Hip hop is there to keep the herbs out, and you have been kept out. It did exactly what it was designed to do. It kept fake people like you out. So if that sense, yes, hip hop did stop you from merging with the Black community. Doesn't stop people that actually love and respect and value the culture.
Whew, God, we're gonna clip that one. Now I gotta say, a lot of people on the left could have heard what you just said and loved it, right?
Mhm.
You missed something about what hip hop was complaining about at that time, and I had never thought about hip hop being born in the cradle of progressivism, and how you're totally right, how it was nothing but a litany of complaint, not nothing, but mostly a litany of complaints about what progressivism had done to black, or given to black people. You missed one big point, which was where literally, physically, specifically was hip hop born. It was born in a public housing project.
Projects, yes.
Right.
Yes, it was.
They complained about the public housing. Grandmaster Flash was about complaining about the whole thing, but you're totally funny. That's amazing. That's amazing. I never put that together.
Yeah, and if you look at so if you take that iteration, and that's the first iteration of hip hop, when you look at it from what came out of hip hop, what came out of New York, then you had the second generation, and the second generation came out of LA. Yeah. So that's when you got the Pac kind of era of everything. Mm-hmm. And what were they complaining about? The public housing, mm-hmm. the shitty school, the lack of job. Well, who was running in California?
Correct.
So every place you go and look where these complaints are sprouting up, so much that hip hop needs a voice, the community needs a voice. There are all of these progressive areas. So
wow.
And two, you can follow it politically, because the Black Renaissance happened in Harlem as well. So it was birthed there. Mm-hmm. And then the second kind of radical side of that happened in California. So you can see the culture following the political aspect, the intellectual aspect of it, mm-hmm. from New York to California. Now, here's the thing, again, that most people watch or miss during the third iteration. Okay, so when Black politics basically left the stronghold of California, where did it go? It went to Chicago, Illinois. So now you look at the Democratic political machine as being run out of Chicago, right? Mm-hmm. Where did the culture go?
I don't know what you mean.
The culture went to Atlanta.
Oh, yeah. Well, yeah. The music.
So, yeah, the culture. The culture went to Atlanta.
Right.
So this was the first break between Black culture and the Black intellect. The Black intellect went to Chicago. Progressivism, Democratic stronghold. It stuck to its roots, to what it really believed in. The Black culture went to Atlanta. What did they go to Atlanta for? Capitalism, freedom, money make, they went there to follow a different route, a different intellectual route, a different ideological route. Mm-hmm. They didn't follow the politics into progressivism. Mm-hmm. They went and found their own mode of capitalism. And from that, you saw the biggest expansion of hip hop, point blank period, since its existence. Right. So it doesn't take away from what happened in New York or what happened in California. But when Atlanta took hip hop as a cultural beacon and a capitalistic beacon, mm-hmm. it exploded. And now you have Atlanta, as some of them call it, the Black Wakanda. Mm-hmm. That's what it is. It's our Black Wall Street. It's the one that survived. And a lot of that survival stems from hip hop making a home there.
You sounded like Killer Mike a little bit. That's what Mike talks about.
I love Killer Mike. Yeah.
Me too. So I was on his show a couple of years ago, and to talk about something that you're very fond of talking about, which is the period between roughly the Civil War and the 1960s. And you're talking about Black wealth creation. You're talking about Black Wall Street. You know where I'm going with this, right? Mm-hmm. So, when we're taught that period in the high schools and the colleges and in public culture, that's the period of Jim Crow, segregation, redlining, lynching, the worst racism in the country's history, all of which is not wrong. But what they miss often is that what Black people were doing wasn't just taking the whippings and the beatings. They were building, they were creating. And okay, so we know about people like Billie Holiday and Louis Armstrong, all amazing, phenomenal. We all agree on what they did. But they don't talk about the barbershops and the hardware stores and the grocery stores in downtown Birmingham that were Black owned as of 1940, 1950, when in Birmingham, Alabama, right, which was probably the most racist city in the history of the United States, run by Bull Connor's police force, right? You had I've been there. You had a thriving Black business district. Tulsa's very famous only for what happened in 1921, but that district had been there for decades, and you had
and it rebuilt after.
And they rebuilt after, and those are just two cities. You could find. I am in Oakland, California. I was born and raised here. This had a very vibrant Black neighborhood, several Black neighborhoods until very recently. Now, but under segregation, real segregation down south, right? That's where they did it the most impressively. The Negro baseball leagues was just one way in which they used money from this entertainment thing to then they took the capital from that and then as you were talking about, distributed it into other enterprises, right? And all the Black artists that were exploding during that period, right? Globally, again, a lot of that money. Every one of these Black business districts had a little R&B like nightclub in it, right? Where you had Aretha Franklin or Ray Charles would come through, and that money went to jobs which were held by Black people. It went to the owner of the nightclub, who was a Black person, and it went to the local neighborhood, which was all Black. That's all gone with integration as of the 1960s, essentially. And I know you've talked about this a lot, right? I would love to hear just your take on it, your thinking about that too.
I won't even say that it was necessary. It wasn't necessarily integration that killed it so much as it was Black people's need to get away from other Black people. And no, I don't say that like in a funny way, but this is the effects of redlining that people don't take into consideration. You make the best and the brightest leave, right? So if you're the best and the brightest and you are making economic strides, you can't invest in your community. You can't grow back. You can't do those things because there are laws, real laws on the books, enforced laws. I'm not like, you have to say this because Republicans and conservatives for some reason think I'm just talking about some imaginary racism that didn't really happen. No, there were actual freaking enforced laws on the books that said you cannot invest in these places. You cannot put loans into these places. And where they couldn't stop you in that aspect, that they would put regulatory burdens down that would make it impossible or economically infeasible for you to be able to do it. So like are legitimate reasons. So these people, once given the opportunity to invest, when things were opened up, they went to do it. And I don't blame them for that, because you know what? Their communities were still being redlined. So while you integrated and opened shit up, the one thing that you didn't do was actually remove the laws and regulations that had stalled the damn growth in the first place.
There you go.
So the best and the brightest had to leave other Black people to become successful, not because they wanted to, but because they had no other damn option. And that needs to be understood, because we're having this conversation, and a lot of Black people give a lot of other Black people slack because you left, you walked away, you turned your back. We have to do that to survive. You know what I'm saying? Like, we have to get out of death, poverty, and destruction for us to understand that life and wealth and creation are on the other side. We have to get out. And that's what happened. A lot of the best and the brightest, instead of being able to stay and to grow and to nurture and become a part of the future fabric of that community, they had to leave for their own survival. And that only made the people who were left, who couldn't leave, who had to stay, it only made their situation and their circumstance even more dire, even worse. As the tax base started to shrink, as the businesses that were there left, or the industries that were there started shipping jobs overseas. Like all of these things culminating together, it did not leave a blueprint formula for Black America to have success.
Right.
And we can look at that and understand that. And only through looking at that and understand that can we reverse engineer that. And I think that that's in the space we are right now, where we have to work on how do we look at these things, not through a lens of victimization, and fuck all those people that say history is victimization, not through a lens of victimization, but through a tactical lens of how do we reverse engineer.
Yeah. So fuck all those people who see history as a history of victimization. I want to last question for you then is about racism. Okay. So, there are various kinds of racism. I've heard you break it down, and you and I think we agree there about there's two common types of racism, very different, but they're both racist. But I guess, so let's talk about that. And then I want to ask you sort of like, should Black people, should anyone care about racism or just start ignoring it? But let's get to that in a second. So for me, and I think I've heard you say something similar, like the two kinds of racism are, there's the old school, segregationist, scientific racist. Black people are biologically inferior, innately inferior, incapable of ever becoming citizens. And therefore they either have to be enslaved or segregated or kept out of jobs, blah, blah, blah. Right.
Okay. No, so that would make three. That would make three different types. That would make three. If you're going to add that one, that's
really?
The third one.
That's three?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, because those people are the people I'm like, okay, you don't even pay attention to those people. Those people are not even worthy of discussion so they exist. But see, this is my thing. There's nothing superior about that way of thinking. So I would never call it racist. I would never call it white supremacy. You know what I'm saying? Because I think that this is how their ego gets as big as it does, because they have all of these people saying you're a racist, which basically boils down to superior. You know what I'm saying? No, you're not. You're an intellectual lightweight that I think is nothing more than a joke. And I think if more of us started talking to them like that, instead of just offering them these terms of superiority, then I think that their ego would automatically deflate a lot more. Because I'm not going to listen to some whiny little crybaby that's listening to my show then talk to me about what I need to do. Yo, homeboy, you listening to me. So let's measure who is more superior in this relationship.
Right.
I'm not listening to you. You're listening to me. Why would I ever call you a racist in that scenario? Because in this case, the superior race is, I'll let you fill in the blank. You know what I'm saying? Like, that's unnecessary.
Yeah, we agree. Yeah. John McWhorter says, the times that he's dealt with actual racists like that, he thinks of them as like the gum on the bottom of his shoe. It's not even worth considering. They're not even worth thinking. I agree. And they don't hold any, and the good news is they don't really hold any institutional power.
Any power at all.
They used to, but they don't anymore. Right? We agree. Okay. Now, then there's another, for me, and I think for you, there's another kind of racism, right? Which runs the fucking world, which is what I call liberal racial paternalism, which is a kind, I think it's what we've been talking about this whole time, right? It's
I call it Miss Millie racism. Okay. The one you're talking about is Miss Millie racism. That comes from Color Purple. It's one of my favorite movies. Right. And one day Sophia gets a little lippy with Mrs. and talks back to her, gets herself into some trouble. And Sophia and Miss Missy yell back at her, "I've always been good to you people." Like and it's supposed to be like that bigotry of low expectation until you step out of pocket. And that's a lot of the white conservative, white Democrats and progressives. That's how they feel. I've always been good to you people until you step out. And I think that kind of explains the Karen movement that they have now, where where they're picking on all of the women that likes to tattle and do all of that stuff. That's where that stems from, is that I've been good to you. How dare you come in my building? How dare you know what I'm saying? Like, it becomes that aspect. And I think that that's where the Karen image today is born from. That whole Miss Millie kind of prospect of how white progressives look at Black America.
Yeah.
Then there's the third one, because this one is important too, because people misunderstand this racism, and I kind of want to make sure we explain it. The third one is I call it the Mr. Calhoun racism. Okay, this comes from not a Rage in Harlem. I love a Rage in Harlem too, but Harlem Nights.
Okay, yeah.
So and Mr. Calhoun is the white bar owner that's in competition with Sugar Ray. All right, now Mr. Calhoun does not care that Sugar Ray is Black. He doesn't care that any of the racial aspect that you want to look at it. That is not what he cares about. What he cares about is his money.
Right.
Is being touched.
Right.
It doesn't matter if an Italian was touching his money.
Right.
It would not matter if a green alien was touching his money.
Right.
Anybody that touches his money will get the assault equally. Right?
Right.
But in this case, because you're talking about a Black man, I'm supposed to look at it through the lens of race. No, that's not how you look. That's not how we should be programming it, because those people, they can't compete. That's why they need to shut you down. Those people are not the best and confident and assure themselves. That's why they need to shut you down. It's why they need to cheat. It's why they need to lie. It's why they need to manipulate. They are very, very aware of their own self-inadequacies. And they want to make sure they stop you from shining at your full potential, because that potential is greater than anything that they can ever muster. Stop calling that racism.
Okay.
Stop limiting yourself to that definition, because it is meant to keep you restricted. It is meant to make you think twice. It is meant to make you wonder if your brilliance, your excellence, your just total being is enough.
Okay.
No, don't allow them to do that. Understand that they are scared to fight you, and then give them the fight of their fucking lives.
Yeah.
That's the best way to handle that.
So disempower the term and the concept of racism, and deal with people on human terms. Compete with them just as human beings.
Yeah. And if they want to, in the process, keep throwing race into it, have some fun with it.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? I ain't got no problem if you want to, call out a name. I could call out a name too. You can have some fun with it. It's not to overlook it or to ignore it, but it's to understand your situation and handle accordingly. And understand those things are different than systemic racism.
Yes.
Systemic racism cannot be handled like that. Systemic racism has to be rooted out at the local level, and it needs to be destroyed, the whole core of it, its whole ideology. So understand, I am not talking about policy put into place, actual regulation or taxation, any of those things put into place under systemic racism. That's something completely separate. Okay. But when it comes to individuals and this idea of racism, we need to make sure we're understanding who's across from us, so we can be fighting properly.
Gotcha. Wow. Damn. Thank you so much for this. It's been an honor. It's been a thrill. I feel like I got a haircut or something. I don't know, like there's a lot of fire coming this way. But yeah, you're a force of nature and so brilliant. And I think you're a unique thinker as well. I when I started looking into you, I got constantly surprised, and that was true in this interview too. So Sonnie, keep doing what you're doing. Not that you needed me to tell you that, but I just love it. And thank you for coming on the show.
Thank you so much for having me. And shout out to Hotep Nation.
Absolutely. All the time. All right. Thank you, Sonnie. Have a great day.
All right.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.
This is the Unregistered Podcast, and I'm Thaddeus Russell. To join the new Renegade University, go to renegadeuniversity.com. To join the new Unregistered Underground, the supporting listeners group for the podcast, go to unregisteredunderground.com. Thanks for listening.